You're listening to an IOE podcast.
Powered by UCL Minds.
This is Academia et al., the podcast for anyone and everyone, figuring out life in academia.
You're listening to Academia et al., the podcast for early career academics by early career academics. I'm Carrie, an assistant professor and psychologist.
And I'm Alina, a research fellow and demographer.
We're based at IOE, UCL's Faculty of Education and Society. We're the co-hosts for this podcast, and like you, we are early career academics just trying to figure it all out.
In this very first episode of the podcast, we'll be talking about a lot of things, including equality and diversity in academia, ways in which we can become better teachers, and how to stay connected but avoid getting zoomed out.
In this episode, we're thrilled to welcome Dr. Gideon Sappor. Gideon is a teacher and a psychologist specializing in child development and psychology of education. He is a lecturer in teaching in early years and primary education. He leads the science and learning and teaching modules on the primary PGCE program, working to train the next generation of teachers. In addition, he is the leader of the Guiding Effective Learning and Teaching module, which is part of the Education MA at UCL. Gideon's research interests are in the predictors of children's achievement, such as effective teaching and learning. He is currently collaborating with Dr. Josh Franks in research looking at the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic gap in grades, and a new study funded by the Center for Teachers and Teaching Research SEED grant, looking at trainee teachers' perceptions of ability grouping in classrooms.
In this episode, you're going to hear some acronyms that feel well known inside university walls, but less known outside of them. In particular, we'll be referring a lot to ITE, that's Initial Teacher Education.
We're very excited to be having a chat with Gideon today. Welcome to the podcast, Gideon.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. So Gideon, I'll kick off with an easy question. I know, you've been very active at all fronts in both research and teaching at the IOE. Can you tell the listeners a bit about your area of research and how you got into education?
How I got into education was, there was a part of me that always wanted to be a teacher. So I remember listening to an advert looking for male teachers in primary school. And I thought, wow, okay, this is something I would really love to do. So I applied to train to be a teacher. So that was my journey into education. I'm originally from Ghana, and in Ghana, after your A levels, you have to do what we call national service. So I did do some teaching in the primary school for 1 year, untrained, but it's basically paying the government for your free education up to that point. It was a year of working for the government. Maybe it's like a gap year to give you some maturity before you entered university. I don't quite understand what the rationale was for starting it, but we saw it as paying the government back because we got paid peanuts for working. So we were cheap free labor. So I've always had the love of teaching, and doing that was such a good feeling. So when I got the opportunity here to train, I applied, got on the program, got my qualifications to be a teacher, and I think I was in the classroom for just under 12 years as a primary school teacher. But in between, somewhere in the middle, as a classroom teacher, I always wondered how and why some children you could see had a similar level of potential as others, but didn't do as well as the others. So it was always a question, why that was the case. What determines children's achievement? What makes some children want to achieve their true potential, and what stops others from doing that? So it's always been niggling at me. So this is how I got into the university sector to do the PhD. And a friend asked me, Gideon, what would you do if you won the lottery? And my first answer was, I will enroll on a PhD program. So that it was like an eye-opener, like, okay, so what's stopping you? You haven't won the lottery, but I'm sure you can do it if you put your mind to it. So then I started searching. I didn't know that much about how to do a PhD or how to start it. But did some research and got admission at the IOE became a student in 2011. And yeah, primary school teacher, PhD student, hybrid for a bit. And then I transitioned to teach at the university.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey in a nutshell. And I probably have a follow-up question to that. So academia as a field has started to think hard about equality issues and access to education from different minority groups. Unsurprisingly, all three of us come from very different ethnic minority backgrounds, so this matter is very close to our hearts. I have a follow-up question to the journey that you mentioned. So now looking back and thinking about the next generation of young academics, including those that will be coming from ethnic minority backgrounds, what are some opportunities you would recommend them to engage early on, or any other advice that you can give them looking back at your own journey and about your fears and the courage that you took to overcome them?
What I would say is follow your passion. If you are really passionate about further education, higher education, very often what we lack, from my experience, is the navigational capital, the knowledge to know what to do and how to make those dreams come true. And I think that now there are a lot more avenues, people to talk to know what to do. So a group like the Early Career Network, for example, could become a point of call for somebody out there who is looking for ideas and looking for some guidance about what to do. So I was a bit persistent. I sent emails to almost every university I could think of where I could see myself studying at. I sent emails all around, and somebody at the doctoral school, I can't remember the lady's name, but she saw my email and then put me in touch with a professor who became my supervisor. So if you have a dream, don't look at the barriers, I would say. It's just going for it. Because I just started sending emails.
That's great. So everything, all great deeds start with a simple email. That's really inspiring.
Yeah, and great advice for the young listeners as well. Just give it a go and see what happens, and don't be, held back from that at all. I guess another issue also, would love to hear your thoughts on this. So, Gideon, in the past year, there has been noticeably more discussion about social justice and inequalities, both on the news and also at institutional levels, mainly obviously driven by a surge in racial conflicts like Black Lives Matters, and during the pandemic, Asian hate as well. So, I myself, as a minority ethnic female, but also early career academic, I have seen and noticed, an increase in invitations to be on interview panels and lots of other panels to give or provide a diverse voice on these committees. I was just curious, what has been your experience in all of this?
Yeah, thank you for the question, because I've lived it for a few years now. I was shocked when I heard that in the whole of UCL, with the thousands of academic staff, there were only 20 black academics. 20 black academics in the whole of UCL. And you could count the number of professors on one hand. And so that in the background, it raises questions. And it's true. Well, I'm fortunate I work in ITE, where there is a disproportionately large number of, say, black academics and probably minority ethnic academics. Now, knowing that, it puts a little bit of a weight on your shoulders to know you are one of the very few handfuls around, and I was conscious that whatever I did reflected on people like me. Because for somebody who has never met a black person before or worked closely with them, there's a weight of no feeling I represent the impression that will be created around me. So that was there. And I am also someone who, when I work in an organization, I'm always keen to contribute, join in stuff, do stuff. So I'm not one for sitting back and looking on and complaining that this is not happening, or that's not happening, or it should be this or that. I want to get involved. And as an organization, sometimes we hear a lot of initiatives and talk about how the organization wants to improve things. So, and one is one you mentioned about representation on interview panels. So yes, I did get to do quite a few, but it was all done in my free time. So I remember during the SRD, I had written down how many I had done, and I had to mention it to my colleague during the review to say, this is how many interview panels I have served on, and how many more I'm going to be on in the course of the year. These are all in my own time.
Do you remember how many?
Ooh, maybe 4 or 5. Then that's a lot if you consider the amount of preparation you have to do before and time spent in the interview and then the discussions afterwards. And if it was all in my own time, I remember joining Athena's One, doing all the training. I did Dignity Advisor at work, all the training. Dignity Advice was days of training, days upon days. And that was all in my time. Now, if I want to contribute towards my organization and I'm putting in so much, I think it would be fair to expect something back. Yes, this year I have some time to do some of these things. However, not everything can be quantified. There's no set number of interviews, for example, that you will do in the year. So, say you are given, and if you work in IT, I don't know about your department or your where you work, but in IT, your workload is calculated to the hour. In IT, that's how it is calculated. And so, in the field I work in, where your workload is calculated to the hour, whatever else you have to do, sometimes you have to do in your own time. And it makes things very difficult. But I always look to the bright side. I always look to the future and to positivity and what can be done to make things better. So, yes, in my SRD, I raised those issues. This year, I have some time on my workload for some of these things. It's all in discussion. It's always talking. It's always looking forward. Because if you get drawn too much into what is not happening, it stifles you and it affects what you do. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So true. And great advice on the positivity, focusing on the positive and looking forward and yeah, thinking along those lines.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for talking about things that I don't think we usually discuss, or it goes without saying that people have to do those things and it goes in your own free time. But I would now want to move on to the next set of questions that we have. And that's something that you love doing. And this is teaching. And as you mentioned, you have over 11 years of teaching experience as primary class teacher and over 5 years, if I remember correctly, of teaching at IOE. I've heard the students love you, they speak highly of you, and they give you positive evaluation at the end of the module. Dream. So tell us, what's your magic? What is your teaching style? Why do students love you?
One thing I think is important is being sincere and genuine. And I teach because I love it. Teaching. I really love what I do. I love it. And if you really love something and you enjoy doing it, it comes across. And that I'm always very sincere and genuine with my class, with my student. I mean, it comes down to my accent, for example. I am aware I speak with what I call a posh accent. Now, if my accent is posh and you are not as posh as me, and you struggle to understand some of my words, just let me know, and I will try and it has, make sure you understand what I'm saying or hear me. So it is little things like that. I'm a very open, very sincere, genuine. And if I don't know something, I'll tell you I don't know it. If I'm not sure, I'll say I'm not actually sure about that one. So I believe I hope so. I hope that is the case. Every student in my class sees themselves as learning from me and I myself learning from them. And there is that genuine, honest respect. So it's not like I'm a fountain of knowledge and I'm here to tell you and impart so much knowledge to you. We are here to learn together.
Mm-hmm.
I may have perspectives that you may not have yet. And that is how I approach teaching. And pedagogically, that is what I think every one of us as teachers do anyway. So I don't really see what I do as special. Well, apart from my posh accent.
Well, I wouldn't say that everyone take it as a learning experience for them as well, and not everyone loves teaching, and so you're very unique in this aspect, and you do truly. It sounds like you love what you're doing, and that's what makes a success.
And I guess, you listening to you talking about your teaching experience now in your role, I'm, just curious to know, obviously you've been at the IOE for quite a number of years as well, both, as a student and then now as a teacher as well. How have you found this transition from being a student and then now a teacher? Was there anything that has changed in your roles that you didn't think you would know about or learn about yourself as well?
I think what I didn't know about was maybe the responsibility element. And as a student, I got into teaching because, well, there's a story behind it that I'm not going to go into, but there was a story behind how I got to speak to a class of students, even though I was a student at the time. So I just spoke about my research to a class of students, and then apparently it was good. So on the next class, then I was given the class to teach, even though I was a student. And then it progressed to me setting the essay question and then doing the marking. So I was fortunate to have been broken into it. But even with that, I mean, it's different when the buck doesn't stop with you, so to speak. So the transition into, I would say it's a pleasant one because I get what the students go through. I get it being on the other side of the desk, so to speak. I get it. I understand it. So that probably comes across with my when I teach as well. I get it. I was there not that very long ago. I hope I don't over the years, as the years go by, I don't get so detached from what it was like being a student. And that's something I'm always checking myself on. I don't want to be so far that I forget what it's like to be a student.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, for those students who are listening on the podcast, what advice would you give them about wanting to maybe try out teaching or get into teaching? Any suggestions there or tips?
If you are a postgraduate student, speak to your supervisor. If you are a research student, particularly, speak to your supervisor, speak to someone. I mean, there are always opportunities to volunteer. Always. Even if it involves supporting, maybe proofreading a student's work and talking to them about their work. Even if it means being present in a tutorial and having that one-to-one conversation with a student. There's always that opportunity. So speak to someone. I mean, I think we shouldn't always think about money because there are things I do and somebody says, so will you be paid for this? Or were you paid for this? Sometimes you need to take opportunities to develop a skill, to develop an experience. And that will stand in good stead in the future. And doing something like that will enable you to, for example, enroll on the UCL Arena program. And that was something that I was fortunate to have found out about. And I almost went through without hearing about Arena. So to do the Arena course, you need opportunities to engage in teaching and learning. Some you have to just volunteer, do it, speak to your supervisor, talk to your head of department, find a module leader, talk to the module leader, volunteer your services, volunteer some time, enroll on Arena, and that will give you the preparation you need. And that will help you to start building your CV. So that is something that I think is really important that every student who has any aspiration of going into academia needs to know about, needs to start thinking about. The opportunities you need to start thinking now. You don't wait till you are in and you're applying for a job before you start thinking about experience. Do that now. Volunteer some time. Get involved in teaching and learning.
Thank you so much for this advice. Actually, I've only learned about the arena courses from the two of you and I've checked them out. So I think this is really, really good tip for anyone who's listening. You can become a fellow of the higher education in teaching if you do the arena courses. And if you work at UCL, you might be able to get them covered by UCL. So that's something valuable for those who are listening. And now we want to move about something that is also hopefully to be a fun conversation and topic. Like IUE, we know is a very international place, very multicultural, multidiscipline, multi in everything. And I wanted to ask something that is a little bit more lighthearted. So, by working with such a diverse group of people, first question is, what do you enjoy most? And second would be, are there any good practices or habits that you might have picked up from your colleagues?
I'm laughing because it's really interesting. The student community is more diverse than the academic staff community. So, particularly in my early days of working as a member of staff, I found it more comfortable being with the students than being in a staff room, in quotes, for example. Because being with the students, and there are so many faces that look like you, and some probably speak with a different, a posh accent like I have. And then you go into a meeting with colleagues, and like I'm the only one. So the diversity of the student body is a breath of fresh air, and I think it's something that we need to celebrate a bit more at the IOE, because it's such a fantastic thing to have such diversity. Now, there is diversity among the staff body, and I think it's worth also knowing that, yes, in your tiny bubble where you work, you might be the only one, but there is a network out there. And sometimes I was fortunate to have found a mentor and a friend who helped guide me. Okay. I don't know if she would want me to mention her name, so I'm not going to mention her name. But this question is deeper than you realize. Because for me, my first couple of years, I had that sense of belonging that that didn't fit in with the space. I didn't really have that positive sense of belonging in the space, and there were down moments where I used to wonder if I want to carry on in this space, working in this place. It was meeting some colleagues who helped me to understand the space a bit more, understand how to navigate a bit more. Let me give an example. My contract, I was employed on the teaching contract, the teaching fellow contract. So I didn't realize that meant I couldn't attend academic conferences. I had come out of the PhD. I saw myself as an academic, but in the workspace, I didn't feel like I was seen as an academic. If I couldn't go to conferences, if I couldn't get involved with research, and all I could do was teach, then who am I? Do I really belong here? Do I really fit in here? It was meeting this mentor and friend who helped guide me. I wanted to get involved in PhD student supervision. I did all the courses, but um, it wasn't just a smooth, okay, you've done your PhD, you've got the qualifications, so now get involved in supervision. It had to take some navigation. It had to take some advocacy for all that to happen with me. So that space, the diversity, I found it easier among the students than in the staff body, but it took a while for me to start feeling that sense of belonging at the IOE, to be honest. But yeah, one thing I've learned is every every situation you find yourself in could be an opportunity. Diversity means it's a wealth. So I taught a module where, I mean, more than two-thirds, well, last year, for example, during the COVID, about two-thirds of the module were based in China. So interacting with students from China taught me a lot. It taught me a lot. And sometimes we are led by the media about places, we are led by what's on popular media, but getting to interact with real life people who know about places in real life teaches you a lot more, and you get a more balanced view of places and people. So it's rich. I mean, it's fantastic to engage in. I remember there was a class where there was I can't remember the name, but I just brought out the name and I said, can someone please educate me about what this means? I've read about it, but I want you to tell me what this means. And students to teach me about that. Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, I've had the same. That's really great. I love this approach. I also I see myself learning about the world through people, because this is the world is people, people is life. So completely agree with you. I mean, you went way more sophisticated. I actually had like something funnier in mind. I just wanted to give an example that, for example, when I did my master's in Germany, I was religiously going to the canteen at lunchtime because everyone did, and German canteens are great, and Germans are obsessed with their lunchtime. And I've literally not a single time had a quick sandwich as we do in England. And these bad habits are picked up here. So I actually wanted to ask you whether, reflecting on that, you have any good habits or maybe bad habits that you picked up from your colleagues.
Bad habits. Any bad habits? I'm just thinking about my colleague. who I do research with and who I share office with, what have I learned? What bad habit have I learned from you? I'm not mentioning his name, but you know yourself. What have I learned from you that's a bad habit? I wouldn't say it's, I wouldn't, no, I can't recollect any bad habits I have learned as such. Mm, say, I learned to drink a lot of tea. So I do drink, I think I probably drink more tea than my office mates.
Do you take milk?
Yes. Oh,
Oh
yes.
yeah,
And it
always
has
my
to
boy.
be white. Yeah, I have to have a lot of milk in it. I have to have a lot of milk. I never used to drink coffee. So if it's something that I've learned is to drink coffee. Because they say, can we go for a coffee? Nobody says let's go for a cup for tea.
Of course, yeah.
Because tea means something different. Tea is like a meal, isn't it? It's like dinner. So they say let's go drink coffee. And then when they mean tea or something else.
Gideon, you mentioned this a little bit already, the sense of community, how important that is. And I think, as you know, the IOE Early Career Network, one of our key initiatives or outcomes from our survey last year is to put mentoring at the forefront and to ensure that new staff, existing staff, especially early career staff, that they all have a mentor, someone to teach them the ropes as you had learned from your mentor. So I guess, and also in the past year, we've tried very hard to create this sense of community in the last 2 years. And more recently, this past year has been very difficult and challenging because of the pandemic. And so, for us as a network, it has also been challenging trying to meet or welcome new staff and new early career academics into our network. Meeting everyone, socializing online is a bit strange. I know Alina probably has her story on that as well. But also, for you, Gideon, how has it been? You teaching online, you mentioned a little bit, but also how has it been for you in terms of staying sane? Staying connected with others past year.
Yeah, there were difficult bits and there were okay bits. Yes, sometimes just it felt like being
Mm-hmm.
on your own all the time and just walking into an office and just having that chat, asking that question. Yeah, it wasn't possible. So yes, it took some adjusting, but I would say I'm lucky because I have colleagues who I could call at any time. So I mean, yeah, I have colleagues I work with, a team who I could call at any time. And then we also had like catch up sessions. So we made it work. We made it work. And what you mentioned about the mentoring, I think is really, really, really important. And for someone like me whose contract, I mean, this is the first year where I have had some academic time on my workload. It's always been full with teaching stuff. Okay. Now, it's been really, really important to learn to collaborate. You mentioned the awarding gap study on with Josh, and we've then built on that to work together on the grouping ability versus mixed grouping research as well. So collaborating and that mentoring is what is needed so that, I mean, working online is a new normal. We may never, I don't even expect this. I don't even want us to go back to 2019. I don't want it. This is the new normal. And we need to learn to live with it. We need to learn to collaborate. We need to make the effort, put in the work that makes collaboration work. We need to support one another. We need to, it takes work and we need to put in the work to make it work. And for some, it's important. Everybody needs a mentor. And if you haven't got a mentor, you need to network more. I mean, this early career network is, even if there's nowhere else to go, this will be a place where there will always be somebody you can talk to. There will always be somebody in the early careers network to talk to bounce ideas off because it's needed. It's not possible to work in a silo, and you wouldn't even enjoy it to start with. So one advice will be the network and mentoring. Yes, sign up for it or approach someone and say, would you be my mentor, please?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe on this note too, I know Alina joined the network whilst it was, the pandemic. How was your experience of that actually?
I joined UCL shortly before the pandemic, and I didn't get a chance to meet that many people, or actually, I didn't even know about the IOE ECM. So I joined midway through the pandemic, and I would say it was like like fresh air, like finding out that there are so many people out there just like me, a little bit lost, a little bit not knowing what to do, and that there are so many people. Because also when I was joining, there were quite a big group of early career people who were on finishing their contracts, and many people left, and then we had a hiring freeze and no one joined. And I was literally the last person who joined the department for many, many months, and it felt very lonely. So the ECN is definitely a way to go. And Gideon, thank you so much for sharing your journey and for pointing out the mentoring. That's, as Carrie said, something that we fought really hard to put in place across different centers. And I myself just got a mentor a couple of months ago and already enjoying profoundly our conversations. And for any of you out there who thinking about getting a mentor, do get in touch with us. Or if you're lonely, or if you're not lonely, just get in touch with us. It's definitely will change your perception of being an early career academic at IUE. Gideon, one thing we want to ask you, and we ask all of our guests about that, have you prepared the tip of the day?
Yes, my tip of the day is working in academia is working in a human institution. No human institution is perfect. So you get into an institution, there will definitely be negative things happening and there will be lots of positive things happening. What we need to try and focus on, and that's what I try to do, is to focus on the positives. And if there's something that is not working, that is not right, you find a way of getting it addressed. Try and not get drawn into negative things and having too many negative conversations, and this place is bad and this person is this, and get drawn into that, and it's very, very easy to spiral downward. So always keep a positive outlook and keep looking forward.
Thank you so much. Keep looking forward. That's a great tip of the day. Stay positive and keep looking forward. Well, thank you, Gideon. That was wonderful chatting to you. Thank you for listening to Academia at Al. I'm Marlene Pellich.
And I'm Carrie Wong.
And our guest today was Dr. Gideon Sappor. You can find the link to Q&A pages for our guest in our show notes and a link to the IUE Early Career Network Twitter. Follow us at IUE_early career. If you have suggestions for content or want to be our next podcast guest, send us an email at iue.earlycareer@ucl.ac.uk. Thank you for listening.
Academia et al. Is brought to you by the IOE's Early Career Network. This podcast is presented by Dr. Carrie Wong and Dr. Alina Pellich. The theme music was created by Ronnie Shu. Amy Leibowitz is the series producer, and Sarah Jane Grigori is the executive producer.
Thanks so much for downloading and listening to this IOE podcast.